anchor ourselves to the land. Maybe think of a favorite place that you have, beautiful place that you enjoy. And I'm going to read the acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are being hosted on distinct and diverse traditional territories of the First Nations and Métis where we live. And I think we are on lands that are governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. The idea is that we can all live peacefully together in sharing this one dish, this land, and all that it provides, so long as we each are mindful of only taking what we need. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. But I think we believe that the land acknowledgement is a moment for learning. So I'd like to share something with you that I learned as I was developing the Artificial Intelligence Challenge about combining Indigenous knowledge and AI to solve a problem. About hunting in the Arctic. So in the Arctic, Inuit hunters engage in traditional hunting, and they have to go onto the ice to do that. But with climate change, the ice is becoming very unpredictable, and it can be dangerous for them to go on some parts of the ice that in the past would have been perfectly fine. So the Inuit hunters have actually partnered up with the University of Waterloo, their data sciences department, and they're using artificial intelligence to help hunters understand the ice, where the ice is thin, where it's thick, where it's safe to them to go, so they can still engage in their traditional hunting practices. That was really interesting. And as you go through the challenge, I encourage you, as you're learning about AI, to really look into what different Indigenous communities are doing with artificial intelligence to support their Indigenous knowledge systems. It's quite interesting. All right, so what is this challenge that you are engaging in? By now, your school leader will have read a letter to you explaining the challenge that has this question. How might we help our school use artificial intelligence to enrich the lives and possibilities of every student at our school? That's a big question. If you imagine all the different types of people in your school, different types of learners, different ways, different people have talents and maybe ways that they struggle. Is there something in artificial intelligence for them that can make their lives and their learning better? That's what you're going to be exploring in this challenge. And you're not going to be doing this alone. You actually are joining over 3,000 students across the province of Ontario who've participated in the challenge or are participating right now in the challenge as you explore AI and answer that question. I want to talk to you a little bit about why this challenge matters. It is a real world problem. Real world problems are messy, complex problems that no one knows the answer to yet. And we're asking you to think about something that is a real problem in the world. School boards around the world are struggling with what to do about artificial intelligence. It's come upon us. It's in our schools. We're using it, but how can we use it for learning? That's a question that still needs to be investigated and hasn't been answered yet. And finally, your voice matters. You are the generation that is going to be most impacted by artificial intelligence. You're in your lives, in your school. And so you learning about AI and using your voice and agency to share with adults about how you think about artificial intelligence is really important. And we as adults are very curious about what you have to say. As you head into this challenge is going to have two parts. The first part is going to be learning about artificial intelligence, but the second part is you're going to be learning a problem-solving methodology in order to answer that question. So I want you to think a little bit about problems you maybe have had to solve in the past and the mindsets that are helpful when we engage in problem solving. For the AI challenge, a collaborative spirit is going to be really, really important. Working with each other, listening to each other, especially when we have different ideas about this important topic. Curiosity is going to be really, really helpful. Curiosity and learning about this world of AI and some of maybe the unusual things about AI may allow you to find creative and better solutions because you're so curious and you've dug in deeply to a topic. Open-mindedness, being open to ideas about AI and also the ideas of your working partners is going to be important. Or open-mindedness allows us to think differently about ideas, to maybe discover something that we hadn't really thought about before that's novel, that might be really helpful to finding a solution. Tenacity is going to matter. Solving real world problems are sometimes difficult and hard, and we might get stuck. So, determination to keep moving when there's moments where, we might be a little bit discouraged, and being able to persist and continue to get to the end of the challenge, that is a really important mindset. And finally, adaptability, being flexible, and maybe you head in one direction and then it's not quite where you want to go. So you're able to go in a different direction because of things that you are learning, being adaptable and flexible and being able to change. Also, a really important mindset. So, as we enter into the spirit of this challenge, maybe pick one of those problem solver mindsets that you want to focus and work on. And you might even want to spend some time in your class talking about those mindsets. Well, it's true. Artificial intelligence is already part of our daily lives. And in fact, artificial intelligence has been around since the 1950s. And the first chatbot, Eliza, was actually created in the 1960s. So our artificial intelligence is not new to us, but it's certainly different and changing, and it's certainly impacting our lives a little bit more right now. As you think about AI, being present in our lives, and you try to explain it, you might talk about things like getting recommendations on Netflix and Spotify, using Google Maps, getting those routing recommendations in real time. That uses AI. Voice activated tools like Alexa and Siri, that leverages artificial intelligence. Really great positive things that we all love about artificial intelligence. But we also need to be mindful that there are nefarious uses for AI, things like deep fakes. You may have already come across that, and artificial intelligence being used in cyber attacks and hacking. And what are the media literacy skills we might need to contend with that? And misinformation. AI can generate misinformation. We need to be thinking about those things and aware of those things as we think about artificial intelligence and try and find an answer to our problem and the challenge. And I want you to know that I think we believe in remarkable possibilities. We believe that you students are brilliant problem solvers. We've seen it in so many different ways when students do challenges at iThinks, and that you're very capable of taking on this challenge, and that you are going to come up with many different ideas of possible answers to the question that you are trying to find an answer to. And when you get to the finish line of this challenge, there's some things we want you to know. First of all, any student who has completed a challenge that I think is eligible to apply for a scholarship that's worth $16,000, $4,000 a year. It's for the University of Toronto. It's for any program, and it doesn't matter whether you're in grade 6 now completing the challenge or you're in grade 12 and you're going to complete the challenge this year. You are eligible to apply for that scholarship if you've participated in the challenge. And the other thing we want you to know is that you will get a certificate from iThink celebrating you, acknowledging the hard work that you've done in this challenge. And that is something for you to look forward to get into your hands. And I want you to know that it is okay to know nothing about AI. And that goes for your teachers and for you students. There may be people in your classroom who know a lot already about AI, and they're going to be a great resource to the class as you move through this challenge. But it's okay if you don't know anything. We're going to learn together. So what is artificial intelligence? Here's a definition. Artificial intelligence is any technology capable of solving complex problems that would normally be attributed to or solved by humans and animals. So it's a tool that can make decisions and help solve problems. And how amazing is that we have something like that in our world today? All right, let's dive in a little bit. Grab your sheet of paper with the 5 columns on it. I'm going to share 5 important ideas about AI. At the end of each idea, you're going to use pictures or words to capture something you think is important about the ideas that I share. And here we go. The idea number one, artificial intelligence is math. I think it's really important to demystify AI a little bit in that way and like bring down the temperature because AI can feel a little bit mysterious. Artificial intelligence is simply linear algebra and calculus being used with big data sets, really big data sets to find patterns. AI uses math to find patterns in data. Data is information and can include images, text, sounds, and numbers that humans have created, and that can be analyzed to help us figure out the world around us. In the past, computers would use algorithms to analyze data, which worked for a time. But now we have something called big data, vast amounts of data, too big to be used by regular computers. So we had to invent something different to analyze it, and that's why we have AI. And if you imagine big data, think of it like all the TikToks created on the in the world in 24-hour period, right? Or all the gaming moves people around the world might make in a game that you like to play over a week. Really large pieces of information. That's big data. And then a data set is the data from big data selected to train artificial intelligence. For that first model of ChatGPT that came out in 2022, that data set was all the information on the internet from the global, but only from the global north. We're going to talk about what that means a little bit later. AI makes decisions about the patterns it finds in data. Once big data came along and it was impossible to analyze with regular computer programs, scientists had to come up with a new way to analyze data. So they thought, what if we created a computer that looks like a human brain? Because human brains are very good at handling complex information. So how does a brain work? It has neurons. And so the artificial neural network was created. And here you see an example of a neural network. This one is designed to predict the next word in a sequence. Cat sat on up, and what might the next word be? So what happens is all those words on the side, they get turned into numbers in this set of orange neurons here. And then the artificial neurons, they do the analyzing of the data. As the numbers flow through those artificial neurons, the large language model doesn't actually understand what a cat is, what sat is, what on is, what at is. All it's doing is analyzing numbers because it's turned that information into numbers, and then it makes a prediction, the most likely thing that could be. So cat sat on up. What do you think the word might be? Let's see. Are you right? Not. And beside that, you can see something called a confidence score. So this a neural network, this large language model, is 97% confident that the next word is mat. It could have been rat, could have been bat, right? It thinks the most likely word is mat. All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. You're going to use words and or pictures to capture an idea about how AI is math and data. Go ahead. All right. I'm you're probably writing down some great things or having a great chat, but we are going to move on. If you have other ideas to add, you might want to go back to that column later, but we're going to move on to our next big idea, which is that artificial intelligence is made by humans. Laurel Gaines, who's going to be one of our speakers in the challenge at the end at the celebration, she said something to me uh, in the fall that's sticking with me. Humans can exist without artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence cannot exist without humans because humans create the data that artificial intelligence has to analyze. Right? So it's made by humans. It looks something like this. Particularly for large language models, and if you've used ChatGPT or if you've used Copilot, you are using a large language model. So you may be familiar with that already, but it's really important to understand how they are made, what's going on. To be able to make a prediction, AI needs to be trained on vast amounts of data. So web crawlers scour the internet, scooping up all the data that is out there. Anything that we have that is publicly facing on the internet might be blogs, pictures we've posted, videos we've posted, game moves that we've made, things that are books and newspaper articles and Wikipedia. Web crawlers scour that information and bring it back to these large data centers. They're massive, they use a lot of energy, and they need to use a lot of water to keep them cool. And they use something called graphic processing units. Now, if you're a gamer, you may have noticed in the past couple of years that graphic processing units are kind of hard to get. And that is because before they were mostly used just for gaming. They're really good for training AI. And so they're being bought up by all the companies who are making artificial intelligence, and that is why they're harder to get now and they've become more expensive. But the graphic processing units get put into these big data centers, and then they take pictures of all the data that's coming through, and they try and find all the possible patterns that they possibly can find based on the parameters that have been set for them. And eventually they produce a large language model. Think of it as compressed data. It's been zipped together, and at that point, humans have to take over the training of the AI. But that's what it looks like when things like ChatGPT or Copilot are being created. And for this to work, artificial intelligence uses algorithms. Right? Algorithms are just instructions. Right? They're instructions that tell AI what to do. So if I was to think about writing an algorithm for turning off a light switch, here's two ways we could write that algorithm. We can use words, right? Check if the light is currently on, locate the light switch, flip the switch. That's an algorithm. Or we can write code. You might even have actually ask ChatGPT or Copilot to generate code to turn off a light switch. And if you're looking at this code and you think, I think that might be familiar, if you're trying to guess the language, the code on the right-hand side is actually written in Java. And remember when I said there's different forms of AI? So in supervised learning, machine learning, the AI is fully trained by humans. And a lot of the early work in artificial intelligence was around training AI to recognize images. Picture graduate students in university labs showing millions of pictures to the AI, training it, for example, to recognize a dog. Everything that is a dog is given a number 1. Anything that's not a dog is given the number 0. Dog, not a dog, showing those pictures hundreds of thousands of times until finally the AI has learned to recognize a dog. But all it's done is learn to recognize a dog. Right? It still has to be trained on cat and rat and elephant and house and car and all the other things that we need to teach it to recognize. Right? So if you compare that to a small child being able to learn what a dog is after seeing a dog maybe 10 times and then recognize different breeds of dogs as dogs and know that they're not cats. The human brain is so much more complex than artificial intelligence or machine learning, and we need to remember that. Unsupervised learning is how we train large language models, like the ones that I showed you a little bit earlier. In unsupervised learning, the artificial intelligence teaches itself to find the patterns in data, which is really interesting that it can do that. All right, let's go back a little bit. We're going to take a break. I want you to use words and or pictures to capture an idea about how AI is made. I'll give you 2 minutes. All right, I'm going to stop you there. Sorry if you're in the middle of a really good thought. I always hate doing that, interrupting people. But we are going to continue on to our next big idea, a really important idea, and that artificial intelligence is bias. Now, remember, when we're talking about bias, we're not saying something is good or bad. We're saying that something tends towards this or tends towards that. And it's the impacts of bias that we really want to think about with artificial intelligence. And the first bias I want us to think about is who is creating AI. This is an infographic of tenure track faculty. That means people who are going to get permanent jobs in computer science departments at the top universities around the world. And this infographic is broken down by race and ethnicity. It's from 2019, 2020. The data shifted a little bit since then, but it's still fairly accurate. And if you're looking at it, you'll probably notice that one particular group is overrepresented in terms of who's creating artificial intelligence, and other groups are less represented in artificial intelligence. And we need to be asking ourselves as we use these tools, who's creating AI? Who isn't creating AI? And why does it matter? Of course, it matters because it's about representation and access to opportunities, and we want as many people as possible to have access to artificial intelligence. Because remember, they are tools that can help us make decisions and solve problems, and everybody could benefit perhaps from using artificial intelligence. But it matters because the people who are in positions where they are designing the algorithms, they're likely to create algorithms that make it possible for them to remain in their positions of power because of how AI functions. And they also might tend to work on problems that matter to them and not really think about how their AI is impacting other people in the world from different groups. So, as citizens, we need to be thinking about removing barriers so that everyone can fully benefit from all that AI has to offer in ways that are meaningful to them. Another way that AI is biased is where the data comes from. Right now, the data used for things like ChatGPT and Copilot comes from the global north and mainly North America. On the map, that is everything in blue. And you will notice that some blue countries are in the southern hemisphere, like Australia and New Zealand. They're still considered to be part of the global north because we're not talking about northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. We're talking about advanced Western economies. The nations that are really wealthy and advanced in the world. The data of most of the countries of the world, you can see, is not represented in ChatGPT and Copilot. And in fact, some countries have so little data that even if they wanted to be represented in the training data, there isn't enough. They don't have enough data to want to be able to participate because remember, AI requires big data, lots of data. And if AI is a tool that helps us solve problems and make decisions, if the perspectives of most of the people in the world are missing, how can we know that the solutions being created are helpful to those people and not harmful to them? So we need to be thinking about every time we use artificial intelligence, we should be asking ourselves, where did the data set come from? Who's represented in the data? Who made the data? When was the data made? All really important questions to think about as we engage with artificial intelligence. Another really important thing for us to think about is who has control of the data, right? Somebody's gathering it. Where's that data sitting? And people who think about our rights over our own data, we refer to that as data sovereignty. In this case, data sovereignty is a right of First Nations peoples to manage and control data about themselves, their culture, and their lands and their resources. First Nation data being used in training machine learning systems without permissions actually violates their right to data sovereignty. And First Nations chiefs in Canada have actually published a document about data sovereignty and their right to their data, their stories, their future. They're concerned that things get generated by AI do not accurately reflect who they are as people. And in many cases, things that are in ChatGPT and Copilot and other large language models that we're using we're not given permission to use. It's been taken without permission. And so there's lots of issues around data sovereignty. And some people in previous challenges have explored different topics related to data sovereignty, because really it's an issue for everyone around the world. All right. The next bias, the things we need to think about is who is exploited and what is exploited as artificial intelligence gets created and used. Remember, artificial intelligence has to be trained by humans, and companies want AI to perform well and do the right things. They don't want their forms of artificial intelligence to be harmful. They want users to feel confident, to be able to trust what AI is generating. And to do that, AI has to be trained by humans once a large language model has been created. And the only way to train an AI is to show AI what you want it to do, but also what you don't want it to do. And a lot of the training of AI actually happens outside of North America. AI companies tend to go to poorer countries, in this case, Kenya. Kenya is a country that's actually really wanting to develop its tech sector, but a lot of the training for AI happens there. And when ChatGPT was being created, workers were paid less than $2 an hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. And by that, we're thinking about harmful things that we know are on the internet that we don't want AI to generate. And there's now actually a labor movement in Kenya to try and advocate for the rights of these data workers. But there's lots of issues to think about the impact of artificial intelligence on the world, whether it's the environment or people, that you might want to explore as you go through the challenge. All right, our next bias. AI is biased in terms of what AI generates. So when AI generates a response to our questions or prompts, remember large language models generate the most common pattern it finds in the training data. And that right now, with the AI we're using, most of that data comes from North America. So when I ask a large language model to generate a picture of a Canadian family, I do this about once a month to see if anything has happened with it. And I'm actually always quite shocked by the picture that's generated. It's very biased. Uh, and I'm actually not willing to show the picture to you. I was offended by the picture, and I thought some people would even be hurt by the picture because they might look at that and go, wait a second. That's what my family looks like, and I'm Canadian. So I encourage you to play around with those image generators and see what do you have to do to be able to generate a picture of a family of people who are, that you are aligned with or you feel actually reflect who you are. So as we're generating things with artificial intelligence, we need to be thinking about, is the content accurate? Who's benefiting from the content? Who's harmed by the content? Who is and isn't represented in the content? And the other thing I want to talk to you about is notice while you generate pictures of people, they're all happy. Very hard to generate a picture of a sad person on the internet. And that's called the everything is awesome bias. Because AI is trained on things we put on the internet, and people don't tend to put sad pictures on the internet. We want to post nice pictures of ourselves, pictures we're happy and doing fun things. And so AI has learned that people are generally happy, and that's why it tends to produce pictures of almost ridiculously happy people. You might want to play around with that and notice that as you generate some pictures. All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Use words and or pictures to capture an idea about how artificial intelligence is biased. All right, I'm going to interrupt you once again. You can always add more of your ideas later on once we are finished. We're going to move on to our next big idea number 4. We need to think critically about artificial intelligence. right? Human judgment, our ability to judge and evaluate things that are generated AI are really, really important to be able to do, right? We need to think about as we're critically evaluating things that are generated is that AI makes mistakes. You cannot trust fully anything that has been generated by AI. This is one of my favorite pictures of something that was generated by AI. It's a little bit pixelated and it's a little bit old. It was one of the very first pictures of something generated by AI to go viral. And it went viral because somebody who was running to be mayor used this picture in their campaign material. It was actually somebody in Ontario generated something, didn't look, and it's only when it went out to the public that public began to maybe snicker and laugh a little bit as they noticed things about the picture. And as you're looking at that, I'm sure you spotted something right now. Like the woman on the left has three hands, and one of the arms has plaid clothing on it, and her hand way over on the very far left is actually in an awkward position. And then the man on the right-hand side, it looks like he's actually, his hand is not even present, right? So AI can generate things that are wrong, and we need to be very aware of that. And we need to look at the things and think about the things that AI generates. All right, let's try something else. As we think critically about AI, what do you picture when you hear the word farming? I'll just give you a second to think about that. And then I'm going to show you what AI generated when I asked it to generate a picture of farming. This. How closely does it match your mental model of what farming is? What patterns about farming does the AI recognize and has generated based on its training data? Well, there's plowed fields, there's tractors, there's people working in the field, there's some cows. But you actually need a lot of understanding about farming in order to evaluate or judge whether or not this picture is actually accurate. If you're a farmer, you'd burst out laughing right away when you looked at this. There's all kinds of things wrong in this picture. Maybe you will have spotted some of those things. For example, the cows are out. They're out in the farmer's freshly plowed field. No farmer would be sitting on the tractor when the cows have gotten out. They'd be busy rounding up the cows and trying to get them back in. You might notice that the lines are going in two different directions, which doesn't even make sense. The plow is actually sitting in front of the tractor and the tractor is pulling barrels. Right? And this picture represents kind of a kindergarten idea of what farming might be like, an image you might see in a kindergarten book, but it certainly doesn't represent the way farming might happen in Africa or some of our very large farms in southern Ontario or out in Western Canada that have massive modern machinery that are run by GPS. Right? So although AI can generate pictures, we as humans still need to critically evaluate and judge the things that are being generated by artificial intelligence. And the last piece I want to talk about here for this section is that AI is powerful and it can be used for good. And as you become comfortable with AI and you learn to use it, we really want you thinking about how can you use AI for good as people are going to be working with artificial intelligence. In this case, AI is being used in many ways around the world to help address some of the challenges related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's some really great projects happening. Maybe that's something you want to go and learn about and investigate as you go through this challenge and you learn about AI. AI for good is what we're aiming for here. All right, 2 minutes. Use words and or pictures to capture an idea about thinking critically about AI. Away you go. All right, I'm going to stop you there. And we're going to move on to our last idea, idea number 5. Artificial intelligence is not human. Really important for us to think about, especially because some of the conversations we can have with AI can feel very human-like. But generative AI does not understand what it generates. It cannot think, feel emotions, or imagine things. It merely turns data into numbers and generates the next most likely word, pixel, sound, number, or piece of code based on its training data. Artificial intelligence is not human. All right, 2 minutes. Use words and or pictures to capture an idea about how AI is not human. All right, my friends, this brings us back to our challenge question. Again, if you have questions or things you're wondering about as you think about some of the things that you heard today, you are always welcome to message me or to send me an email. Happy to answer questions from students. Your challenge question: how might we help our school use artificial intelligence to enrich the lives and possibilities for every student at our school? We really want you thinking about artificial intelligence being for good, good in your school communities. You're going to be going through the problem-solving process and making recommendations to your class, to your school. Of course, it's not that every recommendation is going to be implemented. That would be unrealistic. But really, this is an opportunity for you to learn about your thinking, learn from your thinking, It's about you learning to shape your critical lens on artificial intelligence and have voice and agency and feel confident in your use of AI, and then sharing your insights and recommendations to your school community so they can consider maybe how AI could be used within your particular contexts. All right, we are at the end. Thank you for being with us today. You will notice, or your teacher will have received a poster for the classroom that outlines the whole problem-solving process, everything from framing the problem to learning about AI to the problem-solving process. I invite you, once we're finished today, to commit yourself with those problem-solving mindsets that we talk about, your curiosity about AI. I invite you to sign your poster as a signal that you're entering into this challenge. I encourage you and celebrate you as you embrace this challenge, and I can't wait to hear your ideas, what you're thinking, and I'm always here to help you. All right, my friends, have a good rest of your day. Bye.